Hey, this is Kat Bambini, Peace Punk Production. Today we're going to talk about signs that you're dating a narcissist. And I've covered a little bit of this in other videos. And for anybody who's new, we talk about narcissism here just to warn people about the dangers of narcissism and to educate people, even narcissists, on the disorder and the traits and a way of life that would involve not using these behaviors. So first of all, we're describing these behaviors. So we've been going on for about a couple months now describing various behaviors having to do with narcissism. And today I just want to talk about narcissism and dating because many of us are dating. We're dating. And we're having to encounter people who may be narcissistic. And it's hard to know the difference sometimes. So first of all, know that a small percentage of people are actual narcissists. It's not a huge percentage. So there's a lot of hype about narcissists in our culture, and this is from media, people pointing the finger. There are narcissistic traits that, say, people like Dr. Ramani, a clinical psychologist who speaks a lot on the web about narcissism, she talks about it being on the rise. So that's another reason why we need to educate. And I've personally had a lot of experience with narcissism from the time I was young, and I don't really give details. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I like to give an overview of different behaviors, and I will throw in some anecdotes. I might even throw in some of my own stories in the future, just changing names and places so that people aren't hurt, because I don't want to hurt anybody, including narcissists. I'm not here to hurt anybody. And just to say too, on this channel, I do believe that narcissists can get help. I don't think they should die. I don't any of these things people are saying on the web. I'm very Jesus, even though I am not religious. I don't necessarily believe in God. I believe in love, but I do love the example of that archetype, and so I will bring that into my work, where I just believe that people should be kinder and you can protect yourself. Just know your boundaries. You don't need to spend time around these people. So if you're going out on a date, a couple of things to look out for are, do they listen to you? Are they asking a lot of questions? Are they asking a lot of questions about your past specifically? The first thing a narcissist will do when they meet you is scout you out to see if you're a good source of supply. And supply is basically what they think you are. So you're a supply, and anybody else is a supply, and they always need supply. And so they're going to find out if you're going to be sufficient to give them the supply they need. And for you to be sufficient to give them the supply they need, you have to be really good. Be a high achiever, an empath, a light worker. These are the common types of people that narcissists tend to seek out, because they are energy vampires who are draining your energy, and they have an aim to get into your psyche and break you down so that they can then use you as a puppet. It sounds scary, and it is. It's very hard to recover from narcissistic abuse. It's very hard to spot it. But if you can find those red flags in the beginning, you have a good chance of not having to deal with it. And anybody, even with the traits, you would not want to be with, because it's very difficult to be present and have a growing, healthy relationship with somebody who's exhibiting the following behaviors. So I'm just going to ask for inspiration from the universe so that I don't blow this. But the first behavior that I would really point out would be checking their phone a lot instead of talking to you. And this is not a typical narcissistic, trait in the DSM handbook, but it just seems to be an indication that they're not going to be present. They're going to be looking for other people. They're not engaged with you. They're not interested. And a lot of times they do this after a couple of dates, where in the beginning they'll ask you questions about your past, your childhood. You don't have to tell them this. And a good way to do this is to practice boundaries. I'm learning this myself. Just say, no, I'm not comfortable talking about that. Let's talk about something else. Or turn it around and ask them about themselves. This is what I tend to do, is, men in particular like to ask a lot of questions, and then narcissists in particular will ask questions about your damage. So they want to know what's something they can use later for intel to manipulate you. And they want to sell themselves as a person who can fix you and help you with the issues that you have. Sounds really weird, and it is. It's super creepy. It's almost like you know, sociopathic or psychopathic. They are not sociopaths or psychopaths, though. Those are two distinct personality types in the cluster B personalities that are different, but they have some similarities of taking advantage of people, manipulating them, using them, not having empathy, not wanting to do the typical things that people do in society. So you'll find that they're rule breakers. They don't want to follow the traditional rules. They might do drugs, you know, they might ask you to do things you don't want to do. They might be really into sex. They might be sadistic. They might want you to do things with them. And this might not come out till later. So in the first dates, you can notice when they're asking a lot about your past, they're not talking about themselves. They're just asking about you. And they just really deflect or avoid personal questions. And so this is a red flag. Another red flag is, you know, when they're just, once they get you, you've had a couple dates, they're kind of showing you off and acting like you're property or theirs. If you're not really, you know, theirs, you're just kind of sussing them out, and they're on their phone instead of talking to you. They kind of feel like they have you locked in, and so this is when they start to nag you, which is subtly put you down. And so you'll find also that they're pretty negative. And so this is an easy way to spot them. They're pretty negative, and it's hard for them to hide this. They tend to be very disparaging about things, and you will find you're very drained when you talk with them. And they usually put down almost everything. Like, say you're going out in your city, and you're like, I love this city, and they're like, it's so expensive. Or you're like, well, I love renting, or something. They're like, renting is stupid. I used to pay, you know, like, it just, they kind of do these comments, and so by the time you get done with the date or get home, you start to feel deflated because everything that you valued and were happy about, they just chip at. And this is really a psychological tool for them to get control of you by putting you down. So if you have a low self-esteem, if you don't have a good sense of self, if you can't rebuild yourself after that, if you're dependent on people outside of you, then you are very susceptible to these types of people, because they know this. They can sense it. They can sense it by how you talk, by the questions that you answer, even by how you walk, or, you know, what you say, what you're about, your social media. They'll look at your social media. They may already know things about you. You may already find very suspiciously that they're asking questions, but they seem to know the answers. And this is another huge red flag. Like, if they seem to know a lot about you, but you have barely talked, and they're kind of representing that they've been hardcore stalking your social media, this is a red flag, because they should have their own lives. They shouldn't be stalking your social media. You know, usually, generally healthy people will just like check up on your social. They'll be like, oh, cool, you're in art, or, you know, whatever. They'll kind of mention it as just a, hey, I saw you were in art, or, you know, or checked, or they're like sheepishly, like, I checked your profile, because people have a conscience. And narcissists, who are people, but they don't have a conscience. They don't, you know, some of them are really good. They're really sly. And so they'll get you, you know, but you'll notice they might be a friend, they might be a family member, they might be a coworker, you know, but when you're dating in particular, these are the signs to look out for. They tend to be very vain, but not all of them. So there's a video I made called Covert versus Overt Narcissists. Those are just two types, but covert are more secretive, they're more shy, they are the center of attention. You're not gonna find them in the middle of a group, you know, showing off. So they're not your typical narcissist. And overt is the more blatant, you know, like some people in leadership that we've seen who are very just like, whoa, you know, like that's your hyperbole version of narcissism. And that is a person, you know, person in leadership right now, who is very much a puppet, but can cause a lot of harm. And so the narcissist will use pity. They will use pity to get you hooked. That's a red flag. If they are typically men, if you're a woman, I'm gonna talk about men in particular. If you're dating a man, and most men will validate this, a man is not going to ask you to do things for them. They're gonna wanna give you things. It's just, they're just gonna wanna be equal or give you things. They're not gonna wanna ask you to, like, you know, but a narcissist will ask you to do things. They'll start inviting you things or ask you to be part of something, and there's nothing in it for you. You'll start to notice there's nothing in it for you. And so you'll hang out with them a couple of times. You might go to their event or do their thing. They might show you off, take you around, talk to a bunch of people, but they might start putting you down. They might ignore you a little bit to make you feel not special. So they'll make you feel really special to get you out on the date. And then when they get you out on the date, you'll be eating, and maybe they don't introduce you to a friend. You know, maybe they look at their phone while you're talking. Maybe they ask you a question and they're not there. They're not even interested. And then they start talking about themselves, you know. Or they're very interested and they're asking you a ton of questions about your trauma in particular. If you have something that's wrong with you, they might be like, oh, talk to me anytime. You know, you can come to me for anything. A lot of them are very materialistic, you know, so they're very concerned with their appearance. They're very concerned with sex, and they will want a one-night stand, usually. So that's a good way to tell, is they want sex, and they want sex without having to work for it or, you know, get to know you. And so be very careful about that. I have very high standards when it comes to those things, and I don't do one-night stands. I'll just say that publicly. I've had men, you know, proposition me constantly and ask me for that type of stuff because I have tattoos, and they think that I'm like that, but I'm not. And it's a good way to screen, actually. So, you know, just take your time. So it's a good way for them to get close to you is sex, because sex is how they get to know you. And that's how they get information to manipulate you with, because sex to a narcissist is not sex, it's not intimacy, it's a game. They are challenging, they are trying to compete with your other lovers. They're gonna ask you about your other lovers. They're gonna ask you all these things so that they can then compete with those other lovers in their mind and then be the top of the line. And they're also using it for information to manipulate you, because they know that this is an intimate moment that you may give them more information. And this is for male and female narcissists. This is not just for male. Of course, my experience in particular is with male, but I've had experience also very long with female narcissists as well. Female narcissists they don't take no for an answer. So maybe they invite you over, invite you out, and they get very aggressive and rude if you don't do what they want. They might yell at you, and in the beginning they'll be nice, they'll be really sweet, they'll flatter you, they come up and usually they're the ones that start the conversation and they start the relationship because they see that you're interesting, they see something about you. I had one who, she liked, you know, I had like a peace sign on my pants or something, and she found me and at a meeting, like a self-help meeting, and you know, we had a friendship for a long, long time, and I didn't find out anything about it until too late, basically. I had left a situation and, you know, she ended up verbally abusing me when I was homeless, and I told her to stop, and she kept going, and she knew that I didn't have any place to go, and so it was either sleep in my car or at her place, and I was like, I had to deal with it. I had turned down, you know, hanging out on my mom's boat, you know, as an option, but it was too late to go there because my mom had to go, you know, let me in and everything. And, you know, it was not fun. So as soon as, you'll notice with them that the power abuse happens when they see that they can take that advantage, and so they will slowly get to know you and start to take advantage. And this wasn't somebody I was dating, but this was just me describing a female narcissist. So they're very incorrigible, they're very difficult. They do not like to hear no for an answer. Like, I remember I would constantly have to say no, like, I can't come over, I can't do this, I can't do that. And because I was very busy, you know, I was getting an MBA, going to school, doing pole dancing, and I had another girlfriend too, who, this is just a side note, they wouldn't take no for an answer. And so if I, you know, ever called them just to say, hi, how are you doing? Let's check in. Or, you know, they never offered to come over. They always wanted me to go over there. And then if I went over, it was all about them. And I would just be pulled into their projects. Like, whatever they were doing, they would just have me be part of the project. It wouldn't be, you know, what do you want to do? Let's do something together. Because a healthy relationship or a healthy friendship even, you are meeting halfway. You're not always just going and doing what they want to do. And I found in a lot of my relationships, I was just going and doing what other people wanted me to do, because I was pretty flexible. I didn't mind going along. But I also found that they were disregarding my boundaries. Like, I do have work. I had an equal life, but I just felt like I was unequal. And so they look for people like this, friends or people you're dating that are narcissistic, are looking for that unequal balance where you think that you're less than, and they will take that, but they will flatter you. They are very big on flattery. Be very careful. That's number one, I believe, is flattery. Somebody who comes up and starts flattering you out of nowhere and just goes off usually wants something. unless they're just somebody walking by, they're like, I like your da-da-da, and that's fine. Or you exchange something in a conversation, like I was talking, I didn't post the video, there's a video I made yesterday that I didn't post yet. It was called Narcissists Are Salesmen. I'm deciding whether or not I want to post it. But somebody had talked with me about my shoes, and it was an exchange of information, so they were giving me a tip, and it wasn't a flattery that was, you know, for an end. So people can flatter you without it being for an end, but narcissists are flattering you for an end. And you will also find that they give gifts. They want to give gifts, they want to flatter. These all come with strings, so be very careful when you're first dating somebody of accepting gifts. And it sounds weird, but it's a way to protect yourself. And flattery, a lot of flattery. So if you need flattery, then you are already susceptible, and you're gonna have more interaction with these types of folks with traits, or, you know, a personality. If you have trauma in your past, then you also have more of a chance of running into these people. If you go to self-help groups and places where people are not well, you have a high chance of bumping into these folks. So be very careful. They tend to, you know, hang around places that are not conventional so that they can pick up people, because they know that these people might have a weakness and they can use that. You know, like say if you're going to a self-help group, they're trying to take you on a date, you know, instead of you focusing on your recovery. And you'll find that they will get very upset when you're focusing on you instead of them once you get into the dating. Once you're in it and you're starting to have that problem, they start to get very upset with you spending any time with anybody other than them. They don't want you to have friends or family, and they'll slowly chip away at those things. So they're just gaining a lot of information about you. So your power really is withholding that information and letting them get to know you over time so that you can get to know them over time. If you just, and I'm working on this myself, I tend to give a lot of information out, obviously, because it's my job, and people do tend to try to use that to gain an advantage, and I have to be very careful to screen for these types of behaviors. And my standards are really high. If they're, you know, trying to show me off, or taking pictures of me, or looking at their phone and not talking to me, or asking a lot of questions about my past and my trauma specifically, I'm super suspicious, because most people aren't just going to ask about your trauma and your past. And they probably just gonna ask about normal things, and you just chit chat about, you know, sports, or like have some things in your arsenal that you can talk about that are pretty innocuous. And, you know, I'll work on this too, but just generally, you want things to talk about that are innocuous, that are not deep trauma. You do not want to be telling people that on your first date, and that's just intel for them to use later. Even if they are not a narcissist, they can use that information against you because they may not understand it. But narcissists in particular use this information to wage psychological warfare on you. And so that would be my #1 red flag. I know this is a slapdash. I always do slapdash here, so just kind of throwing them out, having a chit chat from the heart, you know, with you about this, based on experience, based on lots of research. And if you watch other videos, you'll know this. And just more experience than I think most people I've met with these types of folks, unfortunately, because I'm an empath. I'm very sensitive. I've had a history of trauma, and I was very vocal about this in public. And it's been a way for these types to sidle up to me and say, I can fix you. And, you know, I fell for that once. I will never fall for that again. But, you know, it's definitely somebody who says they can fix you, you know, somebody who's, you know, starting to act as if they are better than you. Like, you can't seem to do anything right. Like, they're just always comparing you to them. That's another trait. The problem is with some of these folks, it doesn't show immediately. So like I said, you're gonna think, oh, I can totally spot this person. I thought that too, but the covert type are very hard to spot because they're very sweet, kind, compassionate. They seem very normal. They can fake empathy. They even have empathetic eyes. So you can see in their eyes, they look empathetic. They will mirror that empathy. And so what's gonna drive you nuts there is the fact that they seemed really empathetic and you can't figure it out. So just know that there are people who present very empathetic looking with a strong manipulative tendency. Just trust your gut. You'll know. Your gut will tell you. It just will. It knows on an animal level whether or not somebody is for you or not. It just knows. And so don't listen to the words as much as you listen to your person and your body. Because I know with a lot of women I've talked with, I had a friend recently who was talking about dating. It looked good on paper, you know, and that's usually what it comes down to. They look good on paper, they have a good family, they have a good job, they have this. That doesn't matter. None of that matters. If you get a narcissist, none of that's going to matter. All of your world will be shredded. Your psychological health will be shredded. So you don't want it to look good on paper, but have a feeling in your gut that something is wrong. If you have that feeling in your gut, run. Just run. If something's wrong, it's you are out of alignment. So if you're feeling weird in your body, that would be the number one on a date. If you're feeling weird in your body, check that. And you can leave. You can leave. You can say, hey, I'm going home. You don't have to go through the whole date even. You don't have to be afraid. You know, you don't ever have to talk to them again if you find that they have some of these characteristics. You don't owe them anything. One big quality that they have is that they will act as if you owe them something. So when they give you gifts, don't accept gifts. You know, if I go on a date, I like to pay, or I like to go Dutch, because that's also a string, you know. I'm just very modern, but I've also just had a lot of experience with these characters, and when they pay for things or give you things, that is then something they can use against you. And so it's very good to be equal if you can be when you're going on a date. I know a lot of women still date, you know, so the man will pay and all this, and that's fine, but just know that that may give you an unfair disadvantage. You know, so if you do have the money to be equal, or if you do have the money, it's a good idea to do that so that they don't have an unfair advantage over you, and so that they don't feel that you owe them something. And most people are not like this. You know, I spent a lot of my life hanging out with people that are very generous, and have dated people that didn't expect anything back from me when they bought me a meal or whatever. But once I had it happen, I now am just extremely careful, because once it happens, you know, like I said, I had a near-death experience. You cannot undo that damage. And if you are like me, where you had many characters in your life with this, if it was just one, I don't think it would have been as extreme. There were many. It's, you know, it's devastating. And then you have a whole overhaul of your entire world, where you have to start over and learn how to make new friends, you know, rebuild yourself, healthy boundaries. And so it's a blessing in disguise, but I wouldn't recommend it. Because it does chip you down to who you are at the core, and make you really get rid of anything that's not you. And so I'm very grateful to those people, actually, because I wouldn't be who I am today without them. So I'm very grateful. I wasn't before. But I would not recommend going out and finding one so that you can find yourself. You know what I mean? I don't think that's my soul's path. Like if you're into law of attraction or any of that kind of stuff, I have a problem with that kind of thing where it says you create all your own reality, because I never would have picked this, you know. It's like you wouldn't have picked this, but then in the end I'm like, well, it was perfect, actually. This is the perfect way for me to become my true self. So I know this is a little bit all over the place today, but I really just wanted to throw something out for you, just so you have something to keep you going. And you know, I promise a video a day. And this is a big issue for people, and these are the experiences that I've had. So generally, you know, ask a lot of questions about your past, giving you a lot of gifts, a lot of gifts, and you have a feeling in your gut, and then ignoring you once they get information, not really listening, you can tell, faking empathy, you can tell, your gut will tell you something's weird. I mean, immediately I've known with anybody, my gut is just like, no. And I ignored it, because I'm like, I need a friend, I need a partner, I need this, you know, I need this, I need all these things in society. I was like too anxious. I didn't want to wait. And so that's a big, you know, you should be definitely dating when you're okay being alone and being okay by yourself. Because when you need something from somebody else, that's when you're more susceptible to these individuals, because they can sense that. They are psychic energy vampires, and they sense when you need somebody to help you, or you think you do, and they end up draining you instead and it's really messed up, because you're already weak. You know, even people who are healthy can have this happen though, and if you are healthy, then they drain you, and then you end up being weak, because they're using your energy, and you have to have very firm boundaries with them. So I would recommend something called Gray Rock, which is just be quiet, you know, be as boring as possible. If you find that you encounter one of these individuals, be as boring as possible. Just, that's great. You know, just don't feed into it, don't give them information. They will keep pushing, and if they are narcissistic, they usually tend to be pretty bossy. Even if they are the covert type, they tend to be pretty bossy, and they will keep pushing for information, and that's not okay. You know, you have other resources that you can draw back on, and I would just be very careful with the, you know, the one-night stands with people you don't know very well, and with, you know, especially because that's the greatest way for them to hook you is sex. They will seduce you, and then once that happens, you are in, and then you can't get out. It's harder to get out. And it's because of the pity play usually, because they convince you that you owe them something, they make you feel sorry for them. This is something that psychopaths do as well. They want you to feel sorry for them, and if you're an empathetic person, you're gonna feel sorry for them because they'll be very good at convincing you. But like I said, men don't generally ask you to do things for them or feel sorry for them if they're healthy. And so that's a huge red flag. You know, a lot of men are just very much like, I'll take care of myself, and they don't want that kind of help, you know? But these types are very much like, and women too, they want you to feel sorry for them, to get you hooked, and they want to obligate you. They want you to feel obligated to them. So the pity and the obligation are the two huge things, and then sex, you know, and the interview that they do to find out your past. Those are all red flags. So if you see those on a date, be very careful. You can come here and comment, you know, bookmark this, and talk about other things that you've observed. Talk about, if this happens to you, you can come here and talk about it and be like, this happened, what do you think, you know? Because you may not know, maybe you think that there's something that's narcissistic and you're not quite sure. Feel free to come back here and ask, and we can talk about it. And just be very careful. Be careful of one-night stands, be careful of free gifts, be careful of letting other people pay for your stuff. I know, it's hard, but these are the ways that I found to avoid them and to be free from them and to be strong enough that I don't get sucked in, you know? So as soon as they pay for a meal, offer you a gift, get you in bed, obligation. And I've had these types ask me, say, for one-night stands, and I say no, and they still ask. They don't listen to they push past your boundaries. That's a huge red flag, pushing past your boundaries. And also being very seductive, but using things like, you know, I had one I went on a date with, and I can't remember exactly what, it was something about like, most women like getting raped or something, they said. So they'll put things in your head that are just not quite right. They'll